And let's do the 4 limitless contemplations. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Semjen tamje dewatang dewe jutang din pajuchik, dungal tang dungal chichutang trawajuchik, dungal mepe dewa tampatang mindra wajuchik, nering chaktan nitan trawe, tanum chimpo lane pajuchik. So good evening, everybody. If you can turn on your cameras, I love it, please. It makes a big difference. And I'm sorry, my voice is very croaky tonight. I will do my very best. But tonight, we're going to talk about human relationships, dependent or transcendent. And I think it's a very important subject matter because I think that we have to learn another way in this world of looking at relationships. So I'm going to start with a story. Some of you might have heard it, but when I see how many times Ringu Tulku tells his stories, I don't mind occasionally telling mine again. Okay, but this is a lovely story. It goes like this. Mullah Nasruddin was sitting in a tea shop when a friend came excitedly to speak to him. I'm about to get married, Mullah, his friend stated, and I'm very excited. Mullah, have you ever thought of marriage yourself? Nasruddin replied, I did think of getting married. In fact, in my youth, I really wanted to do so. I waited to find for myself the perfect wife. I traveled looking for her, first to Damascus. There I met a beautiful woman who was gracious, kind, and deeply spiritual, but she had no worldly knowledge. I traveled further and went to Isfahan. There I met a woman who was both spiritual and worldly, beautiful in many ways, but we did not communicate well. Finally, I went to Cairo, and there, after much searching, I found her. She was spiritually deep, graceful, and beautiful in every respect, at home in the world and at home in the realms beyond it. I felt I had found the perfect wife. His friend questioned further, then you did not marry her, Mullah? Alas, said Nasruddin as he shook his head, she was unfortunately waiting for the perfect husband. So when we look at that, it's quite a funny thing, because I'm going to give you what Zonkar Kienzi says about dating agencies and about all of that, because it's quite funny. So if you can feed before your electricity goes off, can we go to the perfect empathy, that one of Charlie Brown's sister and the doggy, what's his name? Snoopy. Okay, so Snoopy and Charlie Brown's sister are on the floor there, and she's crawling around, and he's as smiley as anything, and he says, I sure like Charlie Brown's little sister. Somehow I feel that she and I have something in common. I just can't figure out what it is, though. And then he's sitting, and as he sees her crawling along, he says, that's it. She's the only one around here who knows how to walk on 4 feet. Very important, because empathy is very important in relationships, and we don't know how to communicate with everyone. And then just that last one of Shirley and ethnic in the small society that I sent you, if you can. Not that one. That's it. So Shirley says to ethnic, sigh, let's face it, ethnic, it's over. Maybe if you were different and I were different and this place were different and our needs were different and all our friends were different, things might have worked out differently. Okay, those are my two cartoons. I've got lots of them from over all the years of everything. And then I just want to read you quickly a little poem on masks. And in Buddhism, this has got a double bind, the masks, but this is what this guy, Peter Lehman, wrote. He said, Don't be fooled by me. Don't be fooled by the face I wear. For I wear 1,000 masks that I am afraid to take off, and none of them is me. And pretending is an art that is second nature with me. For goodness sake, don't be fooled. I give the impression that I'm secure, that all is sunny and unruffled with me, within as well as without. I give the impression that confidence is my name and coolness my game, that the water is calm and I'm in command and that I need no one. But don't believe me, please. My surface may be smooth, but seems smooth, but my surface is a mask. Beneath this lies no complacence. In this dwells the real me in confusion, in fear and aloneness. But I hide this. I don't want anybody to know it. I panic at the thought of my weakness and the fear of being exposed. That is why I frantically create a mask to hide behind, a nonchalant, sophisticated facade. And to help me pretend, to shield me from the glance that knows. But such a glance is precisely my salvation, my only salvation, and I know it. That glance, if it is followed by acceptance, by love, it is the only thing that will assure me of what I can't assure myself, that I'm worth something. But I don't tell you this, I don't dare. I'm afraid that your glance will not be followed by acceptance and love. I'm afraid that you will think less of me and that you will laugh at me and your laugh will kill me. I'm afraid that deep down I'm nothing, that I'm no good, and you will see this and reject me. So I play my game, my desperate game, with a facade of assurance without and a trembling child within. And so begins the parade of masks, and my life becomes a front. Who am I, you may wonder? I'm someone you know very well. I am every man you meet. I am every woman you meet. I am you. Now, that little poem that he writes, I actually say that Buddhism complicates it even further. When I used to teach psychology and that kind of thing, then that was really good to say, we have to find out who we are. But Buddhism, the Buddha taught that there was no self. So in actual fact, this person that you think you are inside is just a personality, an individual that's transient, temporary, who's going on a journey when you're looking for your true nature to let go. And it's complex because the self we are fighting for is different to who we really, really are. And so we've already got a mask with our personalities and our psychology. And then in Buddhism, we try and crack that mask down the middle so that we can really see the true nature inside. So it's relationships and people are a very complex subject. And me, through all the years that I've been working with people and my own relationships and all the trying times that I've had in my whole life, and from all the counseling and teaching that I've done, I've learned a teeny bit about the complexity of human relationships. My husband will sit here and he'll say, is that so? You know, he doesn't really believe that I have, but I really have learned a lot about relationships. Okay. And I've called this talk, not relationships dependent or transcendent, human relationships, dependent or transcendent. Why have I done that? Called it human relationship. I actually got the idea from Dzongkar Khyentse's talk that Fiona sent me, because, and I will use some of his ideas, but in order to understand what I'm saying tonight, we have to examine the 6 realms of samsara. Now, what does that mean for those of you that don't know about this? Most of you know. What is a realm? A realm is actually a state of mind in which many other beings who've got a similar state of mind are drawn together. Now, they're pure realms and they're impure realms. The 6 realms of samsara are impure realms, mainly created through the particular negative emotion. So, you know, it's very interesting. If you walk past a band of drug addicts, say, they're actually in a realm, because all of them are doing drugs, and all of them have come together, and all of them are in a realm, in their own world, talking their own language and all of that. So we get an idea from looking at something like that, that's a realm. You also get realms of people, like when women are going through breast cancer, they find all the other women who are going through breast cancer. You get together with people who are similar states of mind to you. Now, the 6 realms of samsara come about because of a negative emotion. We have the hell realms, which are really, of course, come about from anger and hatred. We have the hungry ghost realm, which is where people are so attached they just feel it never, ever, ever gets filled, and they're in that hungry ghost. And I honestly think that in our land, South Africa, we've got a real hungry ghost realm, because it seems that people aren't even satisfied after they've stolen a whole lot of money that should be for other people. They still don't seem to be happy. They still want more and more and more. That's called a hungry ghost realm. Then there's the animal realm, and that's a very complex realm, because the animal realm, I think a lot of animals have been humans, and I think a lot of us have been animals. And sometimes people in their human form are really pretty animalistic and primitive in themselves, and they could be taking from the realm. But animals are actually very wise creatures very often, but they don't have the awareness of what they're doing. They don't have the possibility to think out solutions that we do. So they come out of delusion and ignorance, if you look at the realm, and it's really difficult for them. Then you have the human realm. I don't have to tell you very much about the human realm. You all live in it, and you know what it's like, especially in terms of relationships, and it's full of desire. I want this, I don't want this. I need to get rid of this, I want that. Then we have the next realm, which is called the jealous God realm. And if you had kids and you sat around your sports day and things like that, you could see lots of mothers who were in the jealous God realm themselves, because, you know, if your child was better than theirs, there was this hatred, this jealousy, this envy, and you have it in work situations where people are just totally jealous of you, and they live in that state of jealousy. In fact, in that state of jealousy, I often find, like, I was thinking of one couple that I'd counseled where her father left her mother by having an affair. Her first husband left her by having an affair. Now she was in the second relationship when I got to know her. And for sure, he was going to cheat on her. He had no intention of cheating on her, but her jealousy drove him so mad that eventually it actually came to be because of the state of mind. So I think the jealous God realm is quite a difficult realm. And the God realm is a pride realm, a realm where you are absolutely amazing. Everything's beautiful. You look beautiful until old age and death comes, and then you have to go through a really difficult time. I'm not going into any more of the realms. I just wanted to mention them because the realms are the conditioned existence into which beings, according to Buddhism, are born into those 6 realms, okay? And a lot of people say, no, I don't believe that you're born into that realm. I believe that it's a state of mind that you have when you're in the human world or when you're in any other world. I don't know what it's like on the other planets, but that it's a state of mind that comes from a lot of karma in previous lifetime. Now, so people believe it's a psychological state that exists in the human realm. So some people, for example, are always in a hell realm. I mean, you see these people, they're always angry, they're always hatred, they're always plotting, they're always revenging. They live in a hell realm. Or, as I said, with jealousy, or the craving, the hungry ghosts and things like that. So I think we live with people around us that are actually in these realms. Now, my question that I want to put to you from a relative level tonight, which is what Dzongsa Khyentse puts about it, is we are living in a desire realm where there's so much suffering, and we might be in a relationship with somebody who has either that psychological tendency or who was born in the other realms and spent lifetimes in those realms before. Now, if you happen to be in a relationship with somebody who actually relates very deeply to one of the 6 realms of samsara and not anything like your own perception, how is that relationship going to work? Now, it's quite funny because that person is going to have an entirely different perception. And where we go back to human relationships, dependent or transcendent, the only way that you're going to deal with that is with a transcendent relationship. In other words, you are going to have to see, what is it? What is the way in which your partner, and I'm not only talking about partners here, I'm talking about your children, I'm talking about your bosses, I'm talking about all of those kind of things, you know. If you are looking at that, then how would you understand? Now, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche gives a very funny example, because he says, you might have a partner or a child who was a spider in many lifetimes prior to being with you. So he's always fascinated with webs. When I take that even to a psychological level and I say, well, maybe a person who's been a spider, I mean, if you've ever watched a spider, it's really fascinating because they weave their web and then they lure their prey in. Now, let's just look at that. If you had a person who was a spider, or who was a spider, you know, for many lifetimes, he's going to really maybe weave his web around you and lure you in, or a boss who is a spider who keeps on creating webs into which you're lured into. So I laughed about that, but I really thought is, you know, that's quite funny when you look at it. But imagine if you have got a person or a child or a relationship which really the person lacks generosity and is always holding on to everything that they've got. They just hold on so tight to everything that they've got. So if you've got a relationship like that, it really does become very difficult. And the only way you can resolve it is to be able to get a transcendent relationship, which I'm going to teach you about, in which you have a different perception to that person. You do not look at them through your perception and your eyes, because you know you and that person are really trying to work something out. And in the working out, you are also going to change something very deep within your own self, which is just as important as helping the other person, because that's why you've landed up in that relationship, which other people can't understand what you're doing in that relationship. Maybe your own parents can't understand. But sometimes maybe you've got a child who's just very, very, very different to all other children. And maybe you're always taking that child and trying to put that child into the mold that your family background has, or your whatever has, and that child doesn't buy into it. And there's terrible conflict in that relationship. And how do we stand back? So I just want to say this, and then I'll give you a chance, and we're going to come to the 3 characteristics of existence. But when I called the talk dependent or transcendent human relationships, dependent means according to thousands of causes and conditions that have brought this relationship about. We land up in this relationship as a parent, or our own parents, if we look at them. and we're dependent all the time on all the causes and conditions. And the only way we can get past that is to really see them for what they are, which we never do, because we're so busy saying, this person is so terrible to me and makes me so unhappy, or this child doesn't listen to anything, I must get him into somewhere, somehow, get him into boarding school, whatever. And so a lot of the dependent aspect of relationship is that so many people depend on a relationship turning out happily. But how do we know? How do we know? Maybe from the difficult relationship, we are able to really change and turn something in our own beings around. And maybe, even if it is a good relationship in the beginning, the whole of life, the Buddha taught, is suffering. So there are going to be difficulties in it. And we've got to be able to actually understand these. Now, I've got a quote from Taisitu Rinpoche, which is very interesting. He says, "We are not believers of karma ultimately. We are believers of karma relatively." Those are all the causes and conditions. As long as we perceive everything in a dualistic way, that's you and me, then everything is karma. Every single thing is karma. He says, some things we can call karma and some things not, because of the magnitude. But in principle, he says, everything is karma. There's nothing that's not karma. However many strands of hair you have on your head, each one of the strands of hair on your head is a result of millions of karmas. For example, he says, it is said in the texts very clearly that in each of the feathers of a peacock, each strand of those little of hair has perfect alignment of color, and each one of those little hair particles is the result of countless karmas. And trying to find karma, trying to identify karma, he says, is described as being more difficult than trying to find the traces of a bird that flew in the sky for millions of years. The bird would have flown one way, then another, then another. So you have to try and find all those traces. It's nearly impossible. So you have to be omniscient to realize karma, he says. So then, what am I saying about a transcendent relationship, which is really important? Because a transcendent relationship is when we rise. I'll give you a chance now to ask and discuss, is when we rise into a helicopter and we view the whole relationship in its context, whatever relationship it is, even with a boss, there's no coincidence why we land up in certain work situations. There's no coincidence why some people take us to the cleaners. There's no coincidence how we land up in circumstances. These are the hundreds of strands of karma, and yet that is only relative. So we can understand a lot of the causes and conditions by the repetitive relationships. In other words, if you find that you land up in repetitive relationships, like you have a bossy husband, you have a bossy boss, you have a bossy friends, you had a bossy teacher at school, you had all these authoritarian beings in your life, then you know this is a mirror for my own bossiness or my own dominance in previous lifetime. And this is the way that I am getting to work it out. So instead of fighting this relationship, let me perceive it and change my whole perspective. And 100%, when you look at the perspective, the first thing that has to come out of this, can we just get, oh, she's not connected here. The first thing that has to come out of this is the fact that you stop saying to people, you've done me wrong, you've harmed me, you've given me a hard time. You stop. Because suddenly in a transcendent relationship, not a relative one, you're suddenly saying, you know what? I am responsible for the change. You know what I do? I get, over the years, hundreds of couples, okay? And millions of times I've had to go through affairs and all kinds of things when I'm dealing with couples. And so when they come in, you know, the one that's had the affair is the one that's getting it in the neck from the other one, and now they want back in the relationship. And the one who's the one who's been offended is always the one that's saying, this is all your fault. We were fine till you did this. You owe me. You've done wrong. You've done all these kind of things to me. But in the meantime, we can't see the whole situation. We can't see the thousands of conditions. We can't see why this particular difficult child has come through us into the world and what we're supposed to do with that child. We can't see it. So we have to I spend a lot of time contemplating relationships. Sometimes when I'm really angry about something in a relationship, I come straight into my shrine room and then I take the mirror and I look so deeply into the mirror because I want to see, number one, is this repetitive in your life, Melanie? Have you done this a lot of times before? Are you really quite blessed that you've got this difficult relationship because you're having a chance to change yourself? That's the difference between the dependent on that level and always wanting it to work out well and the transcendent looking at relationship. So before I go on, let me just throw it out to you. Some of you may want comments, some of you may want questions, whatever. Please be my guest. I'll give you a little bit of time and don't be shy because it's important for yourselves that you can say that any questions or any comments. I've given you a whole lot of things and I'm going to go on to a whole lot more after this.
Mel,
please.
When you say relative, you mean relative, so you're seeing it from your own perspective. Is that what relative means?
Yeah, and relative, the relative world is the world that is dependent on the causes and conditions. As soon as you get to the true nature of mind, which is where I'm trying to push all of us, okay, there's no more relativity. Relative means relative to the dependent causes. So you are here because your parents had you. Your parents got together because they happened to fall in love with each other. They got together because their parents had them. Do you know what I mean? This watch got together because a watchman made it. I got the watch because I happened to be in the shop where I bought the watch. It's all relatively dependent on what happened before, and that's how you came to this particular thing. Now, when you look at that, it's such an interesting thing because can you ever work out all the relative causes? No, because I'm coming on to the next part, because if I'm Melanie and I'm a solid self and I think I'm a solid self, then, oh boy, I am going to defend me and mine. Okay, and woe is you if you try and attack me and mine. The minute you go into Buddhism, suddenly you realize, oh my goodness, this Melanie is just a temporary, transient drama of this lifetime. I've been so many different beings in so many different lives, so have you. And now we are connecting. I have, like with a lot of you, I've had relationships with you over a long period of time, okay, many, many years. It's a connection. It's an interdependent connection. And in one shot, you can say, I don't like you anymore and you've harmed me and goodbye. Okay, now often if the causes and conditions are very, very strong, you'll come back together. But relative means relative to the causes and conditions that have come before and the causes and conditions that will come. Therefore, it is not ultimate in any way. And the way you can rise out of it is to get to an ultimate state where the relative cause, just to give you an example, it's so interesting because I think I told you this in one of the previous talks, but I once challenged Lama Yeshe Rinpoche because I said to him, I can't understand how you could overcome, number one, all the things that happened to you in your childhood. Number two, all the things that happened to you on your journey from Tibet to the West. I can't understand how you let go of everything. How come you don't hold on to it? How come there's nothing left of all of that? And he said, it's very simple. He said, when you have a lineage connection, a real, true connection, none of it is real. It just absolutely drips off and you suddenly see the truth. And so in the West, we hang on to the relative causes. We hang on to them so much. You did this to me and you did that. Look at all the suing in all the courts. Look at all the court cases and everything. Why do we go for court cases? 1,000,000 times the court cases are not even necessary because now the karma is equal. The causes and conditions are equal. But we're going for that. So just think about it. Does that help you, Mars, on a relative level? And you know what? We don't stop with the relative level. And we have to live in a relative world. So we're going to have all of these things. But it's so important to understand exactly what it means and how do you get to that transcendent level. Thanks for that question. It's good. Anyone else, a question or a comment with pleasure? Anything. Kim, you have to get the beginning of this. Okay. Okay, Cook, sorry. Anyone else? Anything?
Mel?
Yes, Henry.
Yeah, I think to go from a relative, I'm not going to say mindset thinking, a relative thinking to an ultimate thinking is not easy, but it helps you to get closer to a truth. And what I've experienced is an awareness around perception and the difference between reality and perception will ultimately helps you to get to that ultimate thinking.
Just go outline that more. What you're saying is 100% true.
Yeah, because there's no perception in life. There's only reality. And I think when you practice or meditate or choose how you react to situations, you choose. And the awareness around that choice actually really helps you to move into a little bit more of an ultimate mindset.
100%, 100% what you're saying. And you see, and if you really look at the bottom line of what we're saying is, this is all our mind training. I mean, this is why all of you are sitting here learning. What else for? So you can change. I mean, we're never going to have perfect relationships. I look at these poor lamas and some of the disciples they've got to handle. I mean, it's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. So it's really important that we move into that ultimate level of mind, which is what I'm going to teach you tonight, some of the things. And then when we're done with all of that, then we're moving into the elements. And then I'm going to teach you how to use the elements in relationship. If you just think about a Buddhist wedding, I mean, Buddhist weddings are really fascinating because Buddhist weddings are all about the couple taking the elements, the 5 elements, and working with each other on the elements. And I'm going to give you that later on. First, we're going to do all this stuff. And then I want to give you how you work with the elements in your life, how you balance if your fire is your main element, and fire is the main element of the person you're having difficulty with, it doesn't have to be in a love relationship, somebody somewhere has got to compromise something, because you can't have two leaders fighting and scoring on a scoreboard. You're going to have to, one person is going to have the perception to see that they've got to, what we could call, dwindle their light a little bit in order for the other person to succeed. Now, this is a very difficult thing with human egos. And I want to give you a meditation as well on it, but just let's take the 3 characteristics of existence that the Buddha taught. Just write them. Some of you may know them, but write them down, because it's really worth studying. They're called, the Buddha called them the 3 modes of existence in samsara. It's very important that you know this. So the first one is in Sanskrit word is called anicca. Anicca means impermanence. Anicca means impermanence. The second one is anatta. Anatta in Sanskrit means selflessness. So the Buddha said, hang on a moment, the self that you think you are is made up of 5 skandhas: form, your feelings, your perceptions, your habits, and your consciousness. Okay, it's made up of those 5. But actually, none of them exists per se, not one of them. As soon as you die, you know that to be a truth, because all of them die out with you. So the point is, selflessness, when we actually begin to even get an inkling of understanding the second mode of existence, which is selflessness, it gives us another whole perspective to relationships. And the third mode of existence in samsara is called dukkha. Dukkha means suffering. And was the Buddha just talking about suffering, like old age, sickness, death, all of these things which are the normal suffering? Was he talking about that? No, he was talking about that, but not only that. He said, when you're having an absolutely wonderful time and that gets taken away from you, that is suffering. So if you think something is permanent, let's say you're in an idyllic relationship, you have for a while this wonderful relationship or this child that you absolutely adore. Now the child grows up and goodbye, he's gone. Or sometimes you lose the child, or sometimes you lose the partner. There's always inherent dukkha, suffering, in every situation. Therefore, does that mean you shouldn't enjoy situations? No, it just means that you are aware that there is suffering, so you don't attach to the ultimate happiness of what you're looking for in a relationship. Now, when you look at these 3, impermanence, selflessness, and dukkha, suffering, they are the 3 truths that Buddha taught, and we could think that's quite negative for our earthly lives. But he taught these 3 for a very, very good reason. He said, if we know that everything on a relative level is impermanent, so whatever we've got, this beautiful shrine room of mine, it's impermanent. My relationship with my dog, as I saw, it's impermanent. My relationship with my husband after all these years, it's impermanent. If we know that things are impermanent, there is a kind of an acceptance to make the most and really love what we've got, but not be attached. Because as soon as we attach, the suffering comes in. And the selflessness is that when we are fighting for I, me, myself, on and on and on and on, one day we suddenly think, what is it that I'm doing? Actually, there isn't an ego and there isn't a self. And so when you arrive at the portal of death, it doesn't make any difference whether you were a beggar, whether you were a king, whether you were wealthy, whether you were poverty-stricken, makes no difference. The only thing that makes a difference is what you did with your life on a relative level that takes you to give you a little bit of merit and hopefully a little bit of wisdom. But it doesn't really matter who you were, because we've had arrays of thousands and thousands of lifetimes where we've been all sorts of things, where we fought for our rights. And I want to come to what Dzongkar Khyentse says about human rights, you know, and things like that, because a lot of human rights are attached to the self. So it's really for us to think that it's really important to get to a transcendent level with the relationship, and not to see this relationship all the time as you are hurting me, myself, you are hurting me, you are not giving me what I want, you are wrong, you have done this to me, you have done that to me. We always have to, I put at the end of this thing, what about this relationship that is wonderful and is a joy to me? Enjoy it. But remember, the Lord of Death is always hovering around. So eventually, we have to let go of whatever it is. Nothing is forever. And as I say to you, when people say to me, will my mommy be waiting for me when I come to die? Well, your mommy might be waiting for you when you come to die. It would be a very sad state for her if she sat waiting for you to lead your whole life and then was waiting for you. But as I've said to all of you, when you go into the next dimension and you shout, Mommy, what happens if 10,000 mommies come to you? Which one are you going to choose? Who was the one you were closest to? First of all, they're not waiting, because these are just transient roles that they play. Sometimes you have a connection with someone, you still have things to do with them, but we have to know that this is all transient, this is all impermanent, that we are not a self. So we have to get over all the little hang-ups we've got, the millions of hang-ups, not the little one, the millions of hang-ups we've got. We've got so many hang-ups. I don't like this person because they did this to me. I don't like that person because this is what they did. I'm suing this one because he stung me. I'm suing that one. You know, we just go on in our lives. But what we don't realize is we don't even know one cause of the peacock's color in the peacock's tail has got a million causes to it. So how do we know what the cause is, why we are with that person? Maybe it's payback time. Maybe it's us who agreed before, I'm going to help you to really learn to change. Fascinating, isn't it, when you throw it out like this? It's really fascinating. And I spend a lot of time, and I just want to say that Dzongkar Khyentse Rinpoche, you know, he's the reincarnation of Khyentse Choki Lodro, that I actually gave a beautiful teaching, 2 sessions in the Monday morning group. He is the most amazing man, and he's a thoroughly modern Lama, and he has got hundreds of teachings out there, and he's totally modern, and I love to listen to him. I've always got him on in the bathroom or somewhere, and I'm listening to his real wisdom. He's a very wise being. And he said, I went to this science museum, he said, a lot of years ago, and all my friends or whoever he was with wouldn't go into that room, but he went into that room. And he said there was a movie, and the guy said, I want you to watch this movie for at least 10 minutes. So he sat and he watched the movie, and the movie was rising above planet Earth and looking at planet Earth below. He said, I'm not an emotional person, but when I saw what man has done to this planet, he said, I wept and wept and wept. He said, it is pitiful. And do you know that it all comes out of man's inhumanity to man? That's what we've done to our earth. All the pollution is all man's inhumanity to man. Wars and bombs and killings and executions and hatred and fighting for your religion. Was it ever meant to be like that? How did we destroy this earth? And then he goes on to talk about dating sites, which is hysterical, because he was talking about in the good old days when there was the newspaper and people put adverts in the newspaper and they said, looking for a partner. And then they gave all the descriptions. I mean, you can play, he is terribly, terribly, terribly funny when he says it. And he says, you know, now with the social media, we go, I want to meet a guy. He must be 5'8" tall. He must have this and this education. He must come from this family background. He must do all of that. And he says, we're not taking into consideration the thousands of causes and conditions. He says, but he says the dating sites were definitely made by a bodhisattva for the lonely hearts. He said they had to be doing it out of compassion so people could meet people. But I laughed like anything. He says, we might put an advert and say, I'm searching for this person that I met 500 lifetimes ago. I'm searching for them in your media, your social media. I mean, do we know what we're saying? I mean, do we ever find that person that we really do we ever find that child that just comes out on top on every single level? Of course we don't, because we're only here to work out the causes and conditions. And I think he's so funny. And then he goes on to say, which is even more funny, he says, you know, family life. He says, it's like checking into a hotel. He says, all right, let's make it an inn, I-N-N, you know. He says, you check into the inn. He says, some people have a long stay in the hotel. Some people have a short stay and they check out. Some people stay for a very long time and they check out. He says, but remember, in your family, you're going to check out. One of the days you're going to check out with your family relationships. You know, a lot of people get butterflies in their stomach when they think of checking out of your family. And then he says to the audience, you know what? You are all sitting here listening to me for 2 solid days. He says, you know what? I must have listened to all of you for a long, long time. And now you owe me one. You're sitting and listening to me. He says, and you know what? We've all been mothers to each other. We've all eaten each other in previous lifetimes. You know, I laugh when he goes, we've all eaten each other in previous lifetimes. You were the spider, he was the fly, and you ate him. Or you were the cannibal, and he was the person you put in the pot and you ate him. Just think about it, what he's saying. It's actually quite funny. But the point is, he gives it and he says, it's not difficult for me to look at a transcendent relationship because I've grown up like that. That's how we always looked at all the relationships. And he says, we have some common perceptions. Like he says, you all see this as a blue bottle. The only way you see this blue bottle, a blue bottle could be the thing on the ocean. But okay, we all see this as a water bottle. Now, the reason we all have the common perception is because we all in the human realm, we all have some common perceptions that we all see. But take this bottle and give it to someone from outer space. They may have a completely different perception and idea of what this bottle is. So he says it's really important with that transcendent view. And he gives this wonderful example, which I think is really important. He says, there was this nun who was he knew her name, I don't know what her name was, but he said there was this nun. She was a very, very, very devoted, dedicated Buddhist nun, quite a little while after the Buddha. He said, and she was absolutely an amazing nun, but she was very, very frustrated because she said in those times, no females could do anything. If you were a female, you were a second-class citizen, okay, and you couldn't get to do anything. And she really wanted to bring these teachings out to the world, and she was frustrated because as a nun in those days, she never had any opportunity. So what she did was this. She left the nunnery, completely left everything behind, made herself into this glamorous, beautiful girl, and married a prince. This is a real true story. And with the prince, so can you imagine the scandal in the monastery and everything, that she went and she married a prince, and they had a son, and that son was one of the great masters. And she knew there was still another son she had to get. So she left the prince, which was another horrific scandal, married another man and had another son. And those two he gives were these amazing masters that existed and brought the Buddha Dharma into the world. Now he talks about her and he says she could see the transcendent view of relationships. She could see how limited it was for her to be in the monastery without having the opportunity to take her stuff out. He said she could see this. So she just decided to go against all conventions and go and marry a prince and get a completely different life and bring these two masters into the world. Well, what guts and courage she had, don't you think? Because she must have been criticized from here to I don't know where. And many people who try and do different things in their relationships are criticized terribly if they're not conventional. And if they're not on the relative level, Marcel, they get criticized so badly. But sometimes we just have to do it. And you know, it's quite interesting because when I lose myself, I often say, like, I remember one woman that I was counseling who brought her daughter, and her daughter, she thought her daughter was the most impossible person she'd ever met, and everything she wanted her daughter to do, her daughter didn't do. And she says, I said to her at the end of one session, now I was totally oblivious to even saying this. I said to her at the end of one session, don't worry about your daughter, it's your son I'm worried about. Now her son was this perfect specimen who was doing brilliantly at school, who had all the awards, who had everything. And I said, what's your son? Anyway, a whole lot of years later, I mean, the daughter grew up and she stopped all her nonsense and she became very nice and she got married and had her own children and one thing and another. The son, that mother brought the son to me years later. The son had completely broken down, okay, which was a very interesting thing because I didn't even ever remember saying those words to her. She said, you said I should worry about him. And the son had all the pressure because this daughter was wild and rebellious, and the son needed to be this good little boy who did everything, who got all the awards, who got all the presents, who did brilliantly, and he just cracked down completely and totally. So how can we categorize any relationship into categories that are of our karmic self-perception and perspective? And I really want to teach you the elements. I want you to think about this. Let's just do a little meditation. And I don't mind not teaching you more because I've got lots to teach you. And I want to go on to this whole thing of how you use your true nature to start changing your perspective to a transcendent level. But let's do a little meditation. Then I'll give you a chance to ask or comment. So just breathe in and breathe out into the spaciousness of your mind. If you think about who you are, then think of this beautiful heart that you have, in which you have a mandala of all your true nature. And your true nature is completely different to who you think you are. And as we go along in looking at human relationships, I want to really teach you how to look at your higher part of you, not your higher part, your real, true nature, to be able to get a completely different perspective of everything. So breathe in and breathe out and come to this moment. The past is gone. All the difficult relationships are gone. They might be going on, but they're soon going to be impermanent. And selflessness and suffering. Just breathe in and breathe out and allow the spaciousness so that you can actually get a different perspective. And I want you to take your most difficult relationship in your life at this point. It could be with a boss. It could even be with yourself. It could be a close relationship. It could be a child. It could be a friend. It could be anybody. Just take your closest, the relationship that is giving you the most difficulty at the moment. And I want you to just stand back and look at this person. But instead of your usual bias, your usual irritability, I want you to stand back and I want you to look at this person as though you were studying them. So I want you to see a completely different perspective. I want you to just study them as though curiosity were your motive, nothing else. You're just looking at who this person really is. Are they harmful? Or are they struggling? Have they got a mask? What are they doing? Just try and stand back and just view them. Don't look at them yet in relation to yourself. Just look at them as though you were studying a flower in the garden or an ugly bug. Just look at them with curiosity, like as though you were seeing them for the first time. And now, have a look at them in relation to you. But instead of thinking of all the terrible things they might have done to you, or all the criticisms, or all the things they've really subjected you to, you suddenly are looking in terms of the causes and conditions that maybe you created them. And maybe this person is helping you to make a change in yourself, a change that is really needed over a long period of time, many incarnations. You know, sometimes we are the last to see what needs to be changed in us. So as you are curiously looking at this person, you are beginning to understand, is there something in this person that is like I used to be? Is there something that is like I am now? Is this person the opposite to me, showing me something? Have a look at this amazing opportunity, open portal to unity, to change yourself, your perspective, your karmic imprints, your negativity. Is this a chance to change it? And maybe some of you have already overcome a lot with that relationship, or maybe you're just falling for it over and over again. Same old thing. And if it keeps repeating, and it repeats in other people, then you know it's an indication of the fact that you have to change something in you. Just remember the word freshness. Freshness means you always see that your vegetables are fresh, that your milk is fresh, that this is fresh, that that is fresh. You wouldn't dream of eating something that wasn't fresh. Now make your relationships fresh. A new look, a new start of somebody that has been irritating you for a long time. Have it a fresh look. There was once a story of a man who told his son to marry a different girl every day. And so his son had an absolute ball having different relationships. Then one day he fell in love and wondered how he was going to keep what his father wanted for him. And then he knew what his father meant. See her freshly every day as a new person. And when you do, a whole change comes over you and a whole change comes over them because of your response. So talk to me, ask me. Because the thing that Dzongkar Khyentse Rinpoche says over and over again, he says, all these individualism, human rights, individuality, freedom. He says, it's all about the expression of I, me, myself. I want things to be this way. And I was thinking the other night, my son was explaining to us all the different things about gender and about how it is today and about what you're allowed to choose and all. I was so confused. I thought if this was explained to me as an 8-year-old child, I wouldn't know. I mean, how do you tell an 8-year-old child, which lots of these are, if you don't want to be a boy, be a girl. If you don't want to be this, be that. I mean, that's what human rights are about. But sometimes, is that useful? Is that helpful? Does it, is it really, I mean, are we in a position to really choose a lot of things? Sometimes we are, for sure, but sometimes we aren't. Any points, any questions, anything that anyone wants? I don't want to go on and on and on talking. Eugene, you are very quiet tonight. I don't know why, and you haven't got your camera on. Do you want to say anything? You're never usually quiet.
Load shedding. So
So you can't put your camera on because of load shedding. Well, you can still talk. We all know you, so it's okay. I haven't
Well,
heard-
you just like dropped the trans bomb, so like it's a bit of a touchy
it
thing
is a
these
touchy
days. So I'm not going to venture into that.
No, you don't have to, because you know what? He was explaining to me because I want to understand the very complex things of all the transing and everything. I wanted to really, I want to understand, not because I'm being judgmental, but I really want to understand because my generation, we never got any of that, you know, and I really,
But they existed.
go on, yeah.
So two-spirit people existed in ancient cultures for generations, for centuries. Like the
Okay.
oracles of ancient Greece, the two-spirited people of
Okay.
the Maori and the Navajo Indians and those people. So, and also, I think trance kind of makes sense if there's reincarnation, because in one lifetime I'm a male, in the next lifetime I'm a female.
It's true.
And I don't think you wrap up your male-female energy in one lifetime. And that's why
agree. I agree.
you get dominant females and submissive males, and like, so it's a whole, and also like there's gender, then there's sexuality, and then there's identity. So those things get very confusing.
I know. I got my son to teach them to me because I wanted to understand how they work. And I really do get them. But all I'm saying, what Dzongsa Kyetse Rinpoche said in all his talks was, he said that the individualism, the human rights, the individuality and the freedom, he said, of course you've got to have that. We've got to have that. That's, I mean, look in Russia where people don't have freedom to express what they want to express. They just get told whatever they want to get told. That's not the right way. But what he was asking was, we have to really be careful. And I think we all have unfinished male and female agendas, or whatever the case is. I think we have that in an absolute body, you know, at any time, not only because it's now 2024.
Yeah, but the problem is at the moment in America, the gay community and the trans community is being targeted by right-wing politicians to create division. So that's why it's such a hot button topic, because they want to find a minority, get very polarized opposition views, and then like kind of like gain momentum from getting people riled up against a minority. So it's the same as what they've done with the Jewish community in Hitler's times, the same what they did with the blacks in the 60s in America and apartheid. So it's just those people's, literally their rights for healthcare is being taken away.
Listen,
in America,
I'm saying that to you, and I'm saying that individual rights, individualism, human rights, we all have a right to be who we want to be. That's our choice. But in Buddhism, we actually sometimes, and I think this is where the masters are different, because I think many times they are quite amenable to whatever circumstances are actually happening. They're quite happy to live out the dramas, which we aren't happy. We just want to get rid of it and scream about it and protest about it. So I think it's a very difficult thing in relationships, because I think how do we get to the view where we see our luminous mind as wisdom? And I'm just saying, like my grandson, who is 8 years old in London, they did their end of the year play on this, on LBQ, whatever it is. I never know all the lettering, okay. But they did their end of the year play on this. And my son-in-law sent me the whole play. And he's 8 years old. And I was amazed that they did this play. Now, you know, people could say, yay, that's so good, because, you know, it's so permissive. but it also might be confusing until you reach that point where you want to find out about that. If this is taught to little children in the UK all along, it could become confusing, because according to this, if you decide one day that you're now in a male body and you want to be a female, and let's not go into this too much, but you know, you're allowed to decide that. And I'm just saying that there are definitely people that really come into this incarnation and they say, you know, I'm in the wrong body. I really am in the wrong body. And I really feel their pain and suffering. And I've helped a lot of those people. So I know what it is all about. But those are cut and dry cases. But what about all the other people experimenting? Like now there's this whole thing, take mushrooms will take you to these golden heights, you know, and all these kind of things. And I'm not sure that in our individual rights, we really have enough understanding to incorporate all these things. That's all I'm saying. I'm not actually criticizing in any way, because I'm trying to find out myself what it's all about so that I can understand people better. And that's what we're doing in all our relationships. We're looking at people and trying to understand them from a different perspective. You know, I think it's important that. What did you want to say, Henry? Did you want to say something?
No, yeah, you mentioned your generation, and so I think I know what you were going to say, because I'll mention my generation as well, is that we were not taught to think at a relative level. We were not taught the awareness that you are talking about now, but we are now in a lucky situation, because we have this knowledge of transcendence. And it was beautiful how you were talking about, if there's a problem person in your life, is to just react to this at a ultimate level, act with awareness and try and see that person's pain, number one, and number two, try and see what your role is in causing the situation and what your role is in the choices that you've made. And that's my takeout from the meditation.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And that's what I'm trying to say. And I think it's enough for tonight. I just want to read you a little story, because I think really there is so much on the subject. There's a lot, and I'm going to really give you a lot. So I'm going to give you a samsaric little story that goes on. Once upon a time, a lion, a wolf, and a hyena set out on a journey. They met an antelope. The antelope was torn to pieces by one of the animals. The three travelers were good friends. And now the question arose as to how they should divide the dismembered poor antelope, I put poor in, between them. First, the lion said to the hyena, "You divide it." The hyena said, "Well, we'll divide the antelope into 3 equal parts. 1 for the lion, 1 for the wolf, and 1 for myself." Then the lion fell upon the hyena and killed it, and that was the end of the hyena. The antelope still had to be shared out, so the lion said to the wolf, "Look here, my dear wolf, we'll have to share it differently now. You divide it. How would you share it out?" Then the wolf said, "Yes, we must now apportion it differently. There can't be equal shares like before. Since you have rid us of the hyena, you as the lion must, of course, have the first third. The second would have been yours in any case, as the hyena said, and the remaining third shall be yours because you are the wisest and bravest of all animals." This is how the wolf apportioned it. Then said the lion, "Who taught you to divide in this way?" To which the wolf replied, "The hyena taught me." So the hyena taught me. That is called, Marcel, relative living. Okay. We learn very quickly to do all the things that perpetuate the the suffering between relationships. And I think we have to stop and we have to really think about it. So next week, I will go on a little bit more about the relative dependent relationships and bring all your questions, please. And then I want to go on to how the universe manifests with all the 5 elements and how we learn to go to the awakened part of the elements, which then helps so much in our relationships. So let's dedicate. I'll stay if anybody wants to ask me anything, with pleasure. And then let's dedicate to all sentient beings that are suffering. May they all find their beautiful way in the world. May nobody be offended. May people live in the world as they choose to, but be able to see who they really are. And may all the suffering cease in this world. Through this merit, may we achieve all-seeing Buddhahood, and thereafter, once all harmful enemies have been defeated, may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old and death. Sonam die tamche zipane topne nepe tranam pamshene cheganachi balak trupaye sipe sole doa dro warsho. Just